Hey everyone, Brian Porter here at the Porter Pickup Shop. Welcome to our next video. We're going to show you installing humbuckers in this PRS S2 McCarty 594. That's a long model name. We're going to be putting our Anthem PAFs in here. Now I've got these very cool raw nickel Anthems, and we went with the gold poles on them because we're trying to match. Take off the bridge here. PRS does a lot of brass saddles, brass appointments, so we're kind of going to theme that out a little bit with these. I'm a big fan of raw nickel as opposed to the nickel that's in here. So that's what we're going to put in this guitar. I'm going to walk through this process. We're going to take it kind of step by step. We're going to show you some things to watch out for. We do have a couple things on this guitar to keep in mind. We have individual push-pulls to split the humbuckers, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. One of the things to watch out for, and I've already removed the strings, I've already removed the control cavity in the back, is really just be prepared. Be mindful of what your plan of attack is. Make sure you have a diagram handy. Make sure you know your color codes. In this case, our color codes for the Porter pickups for conductor are going to be different than PRS. So we want to make sure that we know what that translates to. So what is your hot, what is your ground, what is your, in this case, the finish wires of each coil are going to be for our split. So that's what we're working with here. Let's take a look in the back and we'll show you kind of our plan of attack for this particular guitar. I've already got the strings off. I've already got the control cavity open just to save time on the filming. So we'll flip this over and we'll show you what's going on in the cavity before we really get jumping into this. One last tip before we cut to the next shot is any tune-o-matic style bridge, keep in mind some of these things are just sitting on here. The stop tail piece on the PRS has some locking. It's got a screw here to hold it down. Sometimes Gibsons don't have that, so you may have two pieces that will actually come up. Just make sure you can put those to the side. You don't want to turn it over and have it fall off and scratch your finish. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off now and put it off to the side. So let's check it out, the cavity. First thing that I'm going to do is we're going to remove the pickups and make sure that they come out. Now I haven't looked inside of the S2s to see which way the wire cavities go. Sometimes the wire from the neck pickup will go to the bridge and then to here. Sometimes, like on a Les Paul, they will have a channel straight underneath the maple cap. So we'll find out what's going on. We'll loosen this neck pickup first. We're going to take off the mounting screws, and that way we can kind of take a peek underneath there. We're going to leave the pickup installed into the ring first, so that way we just know what's going on. We're going to just take a little peek. Now once you loosen all this stuff, just remember it's going to move, it's going to pop out. Chances are, like in a lot of these guitars, it's pretty tight wiring. Okay, so pulling this off here, you can see a couple wires coming from the toggle switch here, and then it does look like there is a channel that kind of straight accesses into there. So that's fine. That'll work out really well. We can kind of unsolder that here. Let's just go ahead while we're in here, while we're in this mode, let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on in the bridge pickup cavity. There shouldn't be anything weird. Probably another angled cavity coming straight out here, because again, we've got our open electronics area. So sometimes in this bridge pickup cavity, you may see a ground wire coming from one of the studs of a bridge into that cavity. So just keep that in mind. That's something you don't want to touch. You don't want to touch that during an install. All right, that one is loose and looks like it's just straight up heading into the cavity. We've got a pretty good amount of slack. So that sounds good to me. I think we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put just maybe one or two screws back in to make sure that we've got this held down. So I'll just, when I turn it over to unsolder the pickups, I'm just gonna keep this somewhat held back down, but I want to take it off to kind of see what's going on. This particular neck pickup has a really tight fit. The edges of the ears of the base plate are kind of scraping the sides of this cavity, so you could see there it was a little more difficult for me to kind of put back down. So we'll just line up our old existing screws here, and this is the point where I recommend taking a picture. Go slow on these. You don't want to blast through them with a power screwdriver. Stop at the end and hand tighten them. That's just important to remember. If you've done this a lot, then you can use something like this, just a USB screwdriver. It's not going to be too powerful. That's going to like blow right through your guitar. So now that we've got at least one screw in those to hold them in place, we're going to flip it back over. All right, I'm going to go with the phone camera here just so I can get up close and kind of show you way down inside the cavity here. Here's what it looks like. You got your capacitors. You have their partial split resistor. You can see that here on the push-pull. So the tone knobs are push-pulls, and then you've got your volume knobs over here. Now, as you kind of scout this out, this is something you can do. Just check out the electronics on your guitar and kind of learn where everything goes and how the signal goes. This is stock wiring. This is how it came. Considering everything that's in there, it doesn't look too bad as far as neatness. Solder joints look okay. They're not fantastic, but they're doable. We're going to notice that our pickup wires are coming in here. We've got, looks like our neck pickup here. It's kind of nice. They've got it, you know, gray and black, and when we put our own pickups in, we're going to want to make a mark on it. So you can see down here, hopefully I can get a good sideways view. There's the finished wires of the coil, so going for the coil split via that push-pull, and then you can see the other resistor there. You can see all the buffing wheel compound and even some of the fuzz from the buffing wheel kind of hanging around the cavity there. So that is the split wire. This is the ground wire going to the top of the casing of this push-pull. So each one looks like, you know, here's the one for the bridge over here. So it looks like it's kind of like that's the sort of pattern that we want to repeat here if we can. So it's looking like there's there's those two, and then again we're just kind of tracing back where everything goes. If you find a diagram, it's obviously you can follow that as well. I'm going to go with the one pickup at a time method. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can take both out and then you can put them both back in. I'm just going to go one at a time. So I'm going to start with that neck pickup first, and it's helpful again with this gray wire. This way, when I put the new pickups in, I don't have to actually mark them. I know exactly which one I'm installing at any given time. So I'm going to get in here with the soldering iron. I'm going to try to do this in a way that you guys can see on the camera. First thing I'm going to do is unsolder that ground from the top of the push-pull. Now it's got a shield on it because on most pickups there is actually a color ground, and then there's actually the physical bare ground which goes to the base plate, which also is soldered to the cover. So sometimes if you've got a stubborn soldering joint, you can add a little bit of solder to your iron. So I'm going to take that ground wire off. I'm just going to keep working backwards here. So now I'm going to unsolder my finished wires from the push-pull pot. And then this gets really tricky in some of these cavities as you're trying to kind of work in and around some of these things. It's a pretty big mess, the solder joint down there. Unfortunately, it doesn't look super good. All right, so we got the finished wires out here. And then we're going to come back to the pot. Now, one thing we want to look at this pot, and it's a little bit hard for you to see there because I've got, again, a mess of wires, but some pots have more than one wire going to them. In this case, we have one of the ends of the capacitor going into that same lug that the hot from the humbucker is going into. So that's just something we're going to have to watch as we pull it out. We don't want to remove the capacitor. So I'm going to get in there, and just once I start seeing some melting from the solder, I'm going to try to pull it out and make sure I'm not compromising the capacitor. I don't want to keep the heat on there too long. As you can see, I was kind of removing that, adding a little bit of solder, and that came out really nice. So everything looks good there. I'm going to flip the guitar back over, and then now we can really take this one out. The whole entire pickup can kind of just come out as one. All right, so we are ready to stage the new Anthem in here. We're going to try these existing screws. I think they look about the same. Keep in mind, as you look at pickup rings, sometimes they're going to have a slight slant on them. They're going to be thicker on one side than another. Typically that's going to angle down towards the fretboard, so your skinnier side is going to be there. You can really notice it on bridge humbuckers. Sometimes just this front side is definitely shorter, so make sure you're angling it back that way. That kind of helps with the string angle and the neck angle to make sure that it's it's the way that you want it, and you can dial those pickups in really well. So we're going to put the screws on the front side and the short side of the pickup ring and kind of hold this in place, and we'll see if these threads work. So it looks like it threaded just fine. Going to align it up, and you have to kind of pinch the pickup ring at the same time. These ones are holding in pretty nicely, so I'm not too, thankfully I'm not fighting it too much. Sometimes you can do that, and there's a lot of different tricks out there. That's going to look super nice, just kind of a little more flat than what's in there. Hopefully you can see that on camera. Just a nice, very nice aesthetic for this guitar. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run this back through. We've got our 4 conductor here. We're going to just kind of, sometimes you can fold it over like this and then just start feeding it back through the cavity. And once you get into, or you feel like it's getting through there, we'll check it in a second, and want to get this down too. So I'm going to put this down, and it felt like it went through. Let's just double check. So I'm going to hold this with 2 fingers, look back into my cavity, and I do have my 4 conductor now punched all the way through, so I should be good to go. And it looks like I've got enough slack to kind of do the wiring that I need to do there. So I feel good about that. I feel good about how this sits in this cavity, and we're not worried about pickup heights yet. So we're going to take the screws that we had in there, and these are going to be the short screws. So like there's longer screws for this one, shorter for this one, obviously because the pickup rings are thicker. So we're going to make sure that we put the correct screws back in. All right, back over here at the cavity, we have our 4 conductor wire. And looking at the amount that we have stripped it back as a stock, we know that that's not going to quite be long enough. It's going to be really, really close. I've got to put the black wire here and the red wire there and the bare wire, and then the push poles there. That's not quite enough slack to kind of spread those 2 out. Typically everything goes to 1 pot, but in this case we're spanning these 2 pots. So one thing I'm going to do is strip back that 4 conductor just a little bit more, give myself some flexibility. I'm going to use one of these vice grip wire strippers. These are fantastic for working on guitar repair. So I'm going to just strip back. It's kind of an auto stripper. It does a really, really good job. You have to set tension on this little wheel right here to find the right balance. So don't just start wailing on it if you buy one of these. Now I have, as you can see, a lot more flexibility to run back and forth with my 4 conductor. So I'm going to repeat this process because I've got a really tight cavity to work with. And as I drop my hot soldering iron in here, I do not want to melt any of these wires. So I want to make sure that I'm not running into that. So all of these are pre-tinned. I'm going to get back in here to the lug of this, and I'll show you guys this on a different camera angle after I finish soldering in. So I'm going to get back to the lug there. I'm going to repeat that ground process. So in our case, it's red and bare. Now they have this shielded, which is a good idea because this bare comes in contact with anything ground. I can put some tape on it later. I can also make sure that it's just going to stay up here and not touch anything else. That should be fine. And again, these are pre-tinned leads, so I didn't mention that, but these already have solder on them, so it's going to make this process a little bit easier. And even as you can see, that particular solder joint on the top of this is a little bit tough. You might run into that. So I'm going to drop that wire down there. As you're soldering in a bare ground wire, don't hold on to it too long. You're going to notice that's going to heat up pretty nicely. And then I'm going to move some wires to the side here because I know I have to put this hot wire right into the same spot that it was before. Now, again, refer to a diagram. Take a picture with your phone if you're not comfortable doing this because you definitely don't want to hook it up in the wrong spot and you don't want to get lost in the process, which is kind of why I'm doing one at a time. Just highly recommend considering that as one way. Again, there's no right way to put them in. Well, there's a right way to put them in, but there's no right method or order to doing that because whatever works for you. This is just a visual way to kind of keep track of everything. All right, so everything looks like it's in there. I got my hot wire here. I'll switch over to a smaller camera so you guys can see inside the cavity. All right, so here is a look at what we just finished here. We've got our ground wire to the top. You can see all the way down there. This is kind of what I was talking about. Hopefully you can see. I'll try to focus that, but there was a lot of solder kind of hanging out. If you can see, you've got the resistor here. There's a lot of solder kind of hanging out on the back there, and that might be something I want to clean up later on. It's like they soldered the lug, but then a bunch of solder kind of flowed to the back of the push-pull, if you can see down below. And then over here we have our black wire coming into the lug with the capacitor. So we should be good to go on that side. And we'll basically repeat this process on this other side and see what we get. All right, so now we're going to duplicate this process with the bridge pickup. We're going to flip it back over. We're going to unsolder all of those elements. As I mentioned before, if you have a guitar where the wire goes through here and then into here, you're still going to need to do the neck pickup first and run that wire through here and then back through there. Some guitars, some top mounted like Tellys have a pocket drilled through. Obviously can't remove the neck, but they'll remove the neck and put a ground or a pickup wire access drill through here. So this is nice because they CNC'd the channels before they glued the top on, which is pretty cool. All right, so that one is still tacked down. Again, keeping that in mind, I'm gonna flip this over. So we've got the guitar plugged into the amp. I always like to do a tap test to make sure everything's working the way we want before we put the strings back on. Another note would be if you've got the strings off, then you might want to consider oiling your fretboard and kind of just doing some general cleanup on the guitar while you're going. I'm going to do it probably like this so you can kind of see it a little bit better. I'll try to hold it. Everything seems good there. I'm going to go ahead and do the push-pull here, and hopefully you can hear that off the camera. I'm going to tap the other side very lightly. I don't want to scratch this cover too much, even though it's... So you can hear how it changes as I pull that push-pull. That means our partial coil split is working how we want. I'm going to go to the middle position, making sure I'm getting full sound from everything. Sounds right. I'm going to go to the bridge position. And then I should, as I pull that bridge tone knob, I should hear a thinner sound and hear kind of that 60 cycle hum come in. You can hear how it gets a little bit louder. So that means that we are in business. You can hear, again, I have this bridge pot pulled. Now it gets louder there. So using a thick metal screwdriver is a really good way to do that. All right, so that was part one of our PRS install. I really like the way these things look. I love how it kind of gives a little bit more high-end feel to this guitar. This is a great guitar, super resonant. I'm really excited to hear the anthems in this guitar. I'm excited to hear kind of how everything works together. We're gonna go ahead and put some strings on this and stay tuned for part two. If you have any questions about this install, ask questions below in the comments, and we're gonna include a link to the anthems here. Again, everyone's gonna wanna hear these things. We're gonna get to the next video where we really feature how they sound in this guitar. So we'll get it strung back up, and we'll see you guys on the next video.